The day my son, Damien, and his wife, Sophie, moved into my apartment was supposed to mark a fresh start for all of us. Or at least, that's what I told myself as I watched the moving truck pull up to the curb in front of my brownstone. I stood at the window, my heart a jumble of emotions. It had been almost a year since my separation from Tom, and while I'd found a certain solace in solitude, I couldn't deny the quiet ache that had settled in my chest. Maybe having Damien and Sophie around would fill that void. Maybe the laughter of a young family would breathe new life into this old home. But as the movers began unloading boxes and furniture, I couldn't shake the feeling that this arrangement might be more complicated than I'd anticipated. "Mom, we're here." Damien's voice echoed through the hallway, snapping me out of my thoughts. He entered the living room with Sophie trailing behind him, her arms full of baby supplies. My granddaughter, Mia, was snugly strapped to Sophie's chest, her tiny face peeking out from a soft pink blanket. "Hi, sweetie," I said, smiling as I stepped forward to kiss Mia's forehead. She cooed softly, her dark eyes wide and curious. "And hello to you too," I added, giving Sophie a quick hug. "Thanks for letting us stay, Mom," Damien said, his tone sincere. "I know it's not ideal, but we really appreciate it." I waved a hand dismissively. "Nonsense. This is your home too, Damien. I'm just glad to have you all here." Sophie offered me a tired smile, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "We'll do our best not to be a burden, Eliza." I noticed the hint of apprehension in her voice, and it tugged at my heart. Sophie had always been polite, even kind, but there was an unspoken tension between us. I knew she found it difficult to live up to the expectations she thought I had for her. And truth be told, I was worried too, worried about how we would all fit into this new dynamic, worried about the strain it might put on our already fragile relationships. "Don't be silly, Sophie," I said gently. "We'll make it work together. It's just a matter of finding our rhythm." As the movers continued their work, I helped Sophie with Mia's things, carefully arranging the nursery we had set up in the spare bedroom. I could feel the awkwardness between us, the way she hesitated before asking for my opinion on where to put things, the way I hesitated before offering suggestions. "Do you think the crib should go by the window or closer to the door?" Sophie asked, holding up a set of floral curtains. "I think by the window," I replied, imagining the sunlight streaming in during the day. "It'll be nice for Mia to have some natural light." Sophie nodded, moving to hang the curtains. I was thinking the same. We worked in silence for a while, and I found myself wishing things could be easier between us. Sophie was a good mother, that much was clear. But there was a part of her that seemed unsure, as if she was always waiting for me to judge her decisions, to criticize the way she did things. By the time we finished setting up the nursery, Damien had managed to wrangle the last of the boxes into the apartment. He walked into the room, wiping sweat from his brow, and gave us a tired but contented smile. "Looks great in here," he said, surveying the room. "Thanks for helping out, Mom." "Of course," I replied, smiling back. "I'm just glad to see Mia's all settled in." Damien wrapped an arm around Sophie, pulling her close. "We'll make this work," he said softly, his words meant for both of us. Sophie leaned into him, her expression softening. "Yeah, we will." As I watched them together, a part of me felt hopeful. Maybe this really was a new beginning, a chance to build something stronger, to heal old wounds. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to try. For Damien, for Sophie, and for Mia. "Why don't we take a break and have some tea?" I suggested, hoping to ease the tension that still lingered. Sophie smiled, a little more relaxed now. "That sounds nice." We moved to the kitchen, where I began boiling water for tea while Sophie took a seat at the table, rocking Mia gently in her arms. Damien joined me by the stove, leaning against the counter with a thoughtful look on his face. "Mom," he began, his voice low, "I know this isn't exactly what you envisioned when you offered to let us stay. But Sophie and we're really grateful. I just wanted you to know that." I turned to him, placing a hand on his arm. "Damien, you're my son. I'd do anything for you. And for Sophie and Mia too. We'll figure this out together, okay?" He nodded, relief evident in his eyes. "Thanks, Mom. I just want things to be good between us." "They will be," I assured him. "We just need to communicate, to be honest with each other." As I poured the tea and joined them at the table, I felt a flicker of hope. This was the start of something new, something that could be beautiful if we all put in the effort. But beneath that hope was a quiet worry. Would we be able to navigate the challenges ahead without losing ourselves in the process? Only time would tell. For now, though, I chose to focus on the moment, on the warmth of the tea in my hands and the presence of my family around me. This was our new beginning, and I was determined to make it work. The days after Damien and Sophie moved in were a mix of routine and uncertainty. We settled into a kind of rhythm, though it was less a melody and more a series of discordant notes, each of us trying to find our place in this new arrangement without stepping on anyone else's toes. It wasn't long before the cracks began to show. At first, it was little things. Dishes left in the sink, laundry piling up in the basket, Mia's toys scattered across the living room floor. I tried to remind myself that they were adjusting to a new routine, that Sophie was probably exhausted from caring for Mia. But as the days turned into weeks, those little things began to weigh on me, each one adding to the silent frustration building inside. One afternoon, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find the apartment in disarray. The kitchen counter was cluttered with dirty plates, remnants of breakfast still lingering. The living room looked like a tornado had passed through, with clothes and toys strewn everywhere. And there, in the midst of it all, was Sophie, lying on the couch with her phone in hand, seemingly oblivious to the mess around her. I felt a surge of irritation rise in my chest, but I forced myself to take a deep breath. This wasn't worth a confrontation, I told myself. I could clean up, and it would be fine. But as I began tidying up, the frustration only grew. Why wasn't Sophie doing this? Why wasn't Damien stepping in to help? It was their mess, their responsibility. I didn't want to become the housemaid in my own home. As I rinsed the dishes in the sink, I heard footsteps behind me. Damien walked into the kitchen, his expression neutral as he watched me. "Hey Mom," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "How was your day?" "Busy," I replied, keeping my tone as even as possible. "But it's good to be home." He nodded, glancing around the kitchen. "Sorry about the mess. We were just about to clean up." I paused, turning to face him. "Were you?" "Because it doesn't look like anyone's in much of a hurry." Damien frowned, picking up on the edge in my voice. "Mom, we've been busy too. Sophie's had a rough day with Mia. And I've been working from home. We'll get to it." I sighed, trying to keep my frustration in check. "I understand that, Damien. But I need you both to understand that this is a shared space. We all need to pitch in." "We do pitch in," he replied, his tone defensive. "But sometimes things get a little out of hand. It's not the end of the world." "I know that," I said, my voice growing firmer. "But it's becoming a pattern. I don't want to nag, but I also don't want to come home every day to a mess." Damien's expression softened slightly, and he stepped closer. "I get it, Mom. We'll do better, I promise." I nodded, feeling the tension in my shoulders ease just a bit. "Thank you. I just want us all to be comfortable here." He gave me a small smile, and for a moment, I felt like we were on the same page. But as he left the kitchen, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a larger issue. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Mia crying. I rolled over in bed, glancing at the clock. 5:30 a.m., the crying continued, growing louder by the second. I listened, waiting for Sophie or Damien to get up to soothe their daughter. But after a few minutes, the crying still hadn't stopped. With a sigh, I pushed the covers back and got out of bed. As I walked down the hallway, I passed Damien and Sophie's bedroom, the door slightly ajar. I peeked inside and saw them both still asleep, oblivious to Mia's cries. "Of course," I muttered under my breath, shaking my head as I continued down the hall to Mia's room. When I reached the nursery, Mia was standing in her crib, her face red and tear-streaked. As soon as she saw me, she reached out, her tiny hands grasping at the air. "Shay, it's okay, sweetheart," I whispered, lifting her into my arms. "Grandma's here." I rocked her gently, humming a lullaby as I walked back and forth across the room. Slowly, Mia's cries turned to soft whimpers, and then to contented sighs as she rested her head against my shoulder. As I stood there, holding my granddaughter in the quiet of the early morning, I felt a mixture of love and frustration. I adored Mia, there was no doubt about that. But I couldn't shake the growing resentment I felt toward Damien and Sophie. Why was it always me who had to step in? Why couldn't they take more responsibility for their own child? Later that day, I decided it was time to have a conversation with Sophie. I didn't want to accuse her of anything or make her feel bad, but I needed her to understand that we all had to contribute to making this arrangement work. I found her in the living room, folding laundry while Mia played on the floor nearby. "Sophie, do you have a minute to talk?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She looked up, a little surprised. "Sure, what's up?" I sat down on the edge of the couch, choosing my words carefully. "I've noticed that things have been a bit chaotic around here lately, and I wanted to talk about how we can make things smoother for all of us." Sophie's brow furrowed slightly, and I could see the defensive walls start to go up. "What do you mean?" "I just think we need to be more mindful of how we're all sharing the space," I explained gently. "I know you and Damien are busy with Mia and work, but I've been feeling a bit overwhelmed with how things have been going." Sophie looked down at the laundry in her lap, her hands still for a moment. "I'm sorry, Eliza. I didn't realize you were feeling that way. It's just, things have been hard lately. Mia's been fussy, and Damien's been working late. I'm trying my best." "I know you are, Sophie," I said, reaching out to touch her arm. "And I'm not saying you're not. But I think we need to find a better balance. Maybe we can work out a schedule or something so that everyone's contributing equally." She nodded slowly, though I could see the reluctance in her eyes. "Okay, we can try that. I'll talk to Damien about it." "Thank you," I said, giving her a small smile. "I just want to make sure we're all on the same page." Sophie returned the smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yeah, I get it. We'll do better." As the conversation ended, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had only scratched the surface of the problem. Sophie had agreed to try harder, but there was an underlying tension that I couldn't quite pinpoint. A sense that something was still unresolved. The days continued, each one blending into the next. Despite our conversation, not much changed. The messes still piled up, the responsibilities still seemed to fall disproportionately on my shoulders, and the silences between us grew longer and heavier. I found myself withdrawing, retreating into my own space whenever I could. I would come home from work, exchange pleasantries with Damien and Sophie, and then disappear into my bedroom, closing the door behind me like a shield. I began to avoid the common areas of the apartment, dreading the sight of the clutter and the inevitable sense of disappointment that followed. One evening, as I sat alone in my room, I heard Damien's voice through the wall. He was talking to Sophie, his tone low and frustrated. "I don't know what to do, Soph," he said, his voice muffled. "Mom's been distant lately, and I don't know how to fix it. It's like she's mad at us, but she won't say it outright." "Well, maybe she is mad," Sophie replied, her voice tinged with irritation. "She's made it pretty clear she's not happy with how things are going. And honestly, I'm getting tired of feeling like we're walking on eggshells around her." There was a pause, and I could almost picture Damien running a hand through his hair, a habit he had when he was stressed. "I just wish she'd talk to us," he said finally. "Tell us what's really bothering her." I felt a pang of guilt at his words. He was right. I hadn't been open with them about how I was feeling, not really. I had tried to bring it up with Sophie, but I hadn't been completely honest, hadn't fully expressed the depth of my frustration and sadness. And now, that silence was starting to take its toll on all of us. As I lay there, listening to their conversation, I realized that something had to change. The silence between us had become a chasm, and if we didn't find a way to bridge it, I feared it would only continue to grow wider. The echoes of silence were becoming too loud to ignore. The morning after overhearing Damien and Sophie's conversation, I awoke with a heavy heart. The truth of their words had weighed on me all night, making sleep nearly impossible. I knew I couldn't go on like this, pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. The silence between us had grown too wide, and it was up to me to take the first step in bridging that gap. As I got ready for the day, I kept replaying the words I'd heard through the wall. They were right. I hadn't been completely honest with them, nor with myself. I'd let my frustrations fester in silence, hoping things would somehow resolve themselves. But life rarely worked that way, and I knew now that if I wanted change, I had to be the one to initiate it. After a restless night, I decided that today would be different. I would talk to Damien and Sophie, really talk to them, about everything that had been weighing on me. The thought made my stomach twist with anxiety, but I knew it was necessary. As I walked into the kitchen that morning, I found Damien sitting at the table, a cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up as I entered, giving me a tired smile. "Morning, Mom," he said, his voice still thick with sleep. "Morning," I replied, forcing a small smile in return. I could feel the tension between us, the unspoken words hanging in the air. I knew I couldn't let this opportunity slip by. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Damien, can we talk for a minute? I mean, really talk." He looked at me, surprised by the seriousness in my tone. Sure. What's up?" I sat down across from him, clasping my hands together on the table. "I've been thinking a lot about how things have been going since you and Sophie moved in, and I realize that I haven't been as open with you as I should have been." Damien frowned, his eyes searching my face. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I've been holding back," I admitted, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I haven't been honest with you about how I'm really feeling. I didn't want to cause any tension or make things harder for you and Sophie, but I've been struggling." He leaned forward slightly, concern etched in his features. "Struggling how, Mom?" I hesitated, trying to find the right words. "I love having you all here, Damien. I really do. But I've been feeling overwhelmed. The housework, the responsibility of helping with Maya, the constant noise and activity, it's all been a lot to handle. And instead of talking to you about it, I've been bottling it up, hoping it would just go away. But it hasn't. It's only gotten worse." Damien's expression softened, and he reached out to place his hand over mine. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea you were feeling this way. I thought everything was fine." "I know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "And that's my fault. I should have spoken up sooner, but I didn't want to seem like I was complaining or pushing you away. I want us to find a way to make this work without anyone feeling resentful or overwhelmed." He nodded slowly, a look of understanding in his eyes. "I get it, Mom. I really do. And I appreciate you telling me this. I don't want you to feel like you're carrying all this weight on your own. We're a family, and we should be supporting each other." I felt a wave of relief wash over me at his words. This was the first real conversation we'd had about the issues that had been simmering beneath the surface, and it felt like a step in the right direction. Just as I was about to respond, Sophie walked into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes sleepily. She paused when she saw us sitting at the table, sensing the serious mood in the room. "Good morning," she said cautiously, glancing between Damien and me. "What's going on?" Damien looked at me, silently asking if I wanted to continue the conversation with Sophie present. I nodded, knowing that it was important for her to be part of this discussion as well. "Sophie, come sit with us," I said gently. "We were just talking about how things have been going lately, and I think it's important that we all have this conversation together." She hesitated for a moment, then pulled out a chair and sat down next to Damien. "Okay, what's on your mind, Eliza?" I took another deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "Sophie, I know that you and Damien have been going through a lot with Mia and work, and I don't want to add to your stress. But I've been feeling overwhelmed with how things have been at home. I've tried to keep up with everything, but it's been hard for me to manage on my own, and I think we need to find a way to share the responsibilities more equally." Sophie's expression shifted, a mix of guilt and understanding crossing her face. "I'm sorry, Eliza. I didn't realize you were feeling that way. I guess I've been so focused on Mia and everything else that I haven't been paying attention to how it's affecting you." "I know you've been doing your best," I said quickly, not wanting her to feel like I was blaming her. "But I think we need to communicate better about what we all need. I don't want anyone to feel like they're carrying too much of the load." Sophie nodded, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "You're right. We do need to communicate better. I've been feeling overwhelmed too. And I guess I just assumed you were okay with how things were going. But I see now that we've all been struggling in our own ways." There was a moment of silence as we all absorbed what had been said. It was clear that this was a turning point for us, a moment where we could either come together and make things better or continue down the path of frustration and silence. "I think what we need," Damien said, breaking the silence, "is a plan. Something that makes sure we're all contributing and supporting each other. Maybe we can set up a schedule for housework or take turns with Mia so that no one feels like they're doing everything alone." "I think that's a great idea," I agreed, feeling a sense of hope for the first time in weeks. If we can find a way to balance everything, I think it will make things easier for all of us. Sophie nodded in agreement, a small smile forming on her lips. Yeah, I think that could work. I don't want you to feel like you're taking on too much, Eliza. We're in this together. The conversation continued, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like we were all on the same page. We talked about what each of us needed, about how we could support each other better. It wasn't an easy discussion, but it was a necessary one. And by the end of it, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a weight I hadn't even fully realized I was carrying. As we finished our coffee, I looked at Damien and Sophie, feeling a renewed sense of connection with them. This was the first step toward healing the rifts that had formed between us, and I was determined to keep moving forward. Before Damien and Sophie left the kitchen to start their day, Damien turned to me, his expression serious but hopeful. Thanks for talking to us, Mom. I know it wasn't easy, but I think it's going to make a big difference. I hope so, I replied, giving him a small smile. I just want us all to be happy here. We will be, Sophie added, her voice filled with quiet determination. We'll make sure of it. As they left the room, I sat alone at the table for a few moments, reflecting on the conversation we just had. It wasn't a perfect solution. There were still challenges ahead, still adjustments to be made. But it was a start. The first step in breaking the silence that had settled over our home and finding a way forward together. And as I sat there, the morning sun streaming through the kitchen window, I felt a flicker of hope take root in my heart. It was fragile, tentative, but it was there. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could make this work after all. The changes in our household were slow but noticeable. Damien, Sophie, and I had started communicating better, and the tension that had once hung thick in the air began to dissipate. But just as things seemed to be settling down, a new challenge emerged, one that I hadn't anticipated: Luca. I met Luca through a mutual friend not long after Damien and Sophie moved in. He was charming, kind, and had a way of making me laugh even on the most stressful days. Our relationship had developed slowly, organically, and before I knew it, I was looking forward to the time we spent together. It felt good to have someone in my life who wasn't tied to the complexities of my family situation, someone who saw me as just Eliza, not as a mother or grandmother. But as our relationship deepened, I began to realize that my involvement with Luca was not without its complications, especially when it came to Damien. One evening, Luca and I planned to have dinner at my apartment. I thought it would be a good opportunity for him to get to know Damien and Sophie better, to show them that he was a positive addition to my life. But I hadn't anticipated how Damien would react to the idea of another man in his mother's life. The tension started when I mentioned to Damien that Luca would be coming over for dinner. Luca, Damien repeated, looking up from his laptop. He was sitting at the kitchen table, his expression shifting from neutral to something more guarded. You mean your boyfriend? I hesitated, feeling a pang of discomfort at the word. Yes, Luca. We've been seeing each other for a while now, and I thought it might be nice for you two to get to know each other better. Damien frowned, leaning back in his chair. I didn't realize things were that serious between you two. They're not serious, I replied, trying to downplay it. But I like him, and he makes me happy. I just want you to meet him, that's all. Mom, do you really think you need a boyfriend right now? Damien's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made my heart sink. I mean, with everything going on here, do you really think this is the right time to bring someone new into the mix? I looked at him, feeling a surge of affection for this man who had so easily become an important part of my life. I do want that, Luca, but I also want Damien to be okay with it. I don't want to lose him over this. You won't lose him, Luca said firmly, placing a hand on my arm. He just needs time, and I'm willing to give him that. We finished cleaning up in silence, the weight of the conversation lingering between us. I knew Luca was right. Damien needed time, and I needed to be patient. But I also knew that this wasn't something that could be resolved overnight. It was a delicate balance, and I was walking a tightrope between my love for my son and my desire to build something meaningful with Luca. As Luca prepared to leave that evening, he pulled me into a gentle embrace, his warmth grounding me in the midst of all the uncertainty. "Thank you for tonight," I whispered, my voice tinged with emotion. "I know it wasn't easy." "It was worth it," he replied, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "You're worth it, Eliza." As he left, I stood in the doorway, watching him disappear into the night. The apartment felt different now, quieter, more contemplative. Damien and Sophie were already in their room, the door closed, the apartment settling into the stillness of the evening. I walked through the now empty living room, the remnants of dinner still lingering in the air. I thought about the evening, about Damien's questions, about Luca's patient, understanding demeanor. It struck me that Luca's dilemma wasn't just about Damien, it was about all of us. How we fit together, how we navigated the complicated waters of love and family. The evening had been a step forward, but I knew there were more challenges ahead. Luca's place in my life was still uncertain, not because of his actions, but because of the complicated dynamics at play. Damien's protectiveness, Sophie's cautious acceptance, my own fears of disrupting the fragile balance we'd managed to achieve, it was all part of the puzzle we were trying to piece together. As I finally made my way to bed, the weight of the day settled over me like a heavy blanket. I was exhausted, but there was a sense of resolution too. We had faced one challenge tonight, and though it wasn't completely resolved, we had taken the first step toward finding a way through it. And as I closed my eyes, I held on to Luca's words, repeating them in my mind like a mantra. "You're worth it, Eliza." The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew that whatever happened, I had to believe in myself, in my right to happiness, and in the possibility of building a life where both Damien and Luca could coexist. The days following Luca's dinner with Damien and Sophie were marked by a tentative truce. Damien didn't outright oppose Luca's presence, but there was a tension in the air that neither of us could ignore. Sophie seemed to mirror Damien's guarded stance, though she remained polite and cordial. The apartment, once filled with the sounds of laughter and life, now felt quieter, like everyone was treading carefully, afraid to disrupt the fragile peace that had settled over us. It didn't take long for the strain to start showing. Damien threw himself into work, spending long hours at the office and coming home late, sometimes after Sophie and Mia had already gone to bed. Sophie, left alone with Mia for most of the day, began to withdraw as well, her once cheerful demeanor growing more subdued. I couldn't help but feel that the situation with Luca was driving a wedge between us all, and it pained me to see the toll it was taking on my family. One evening, after Damien had returned home late again, I found Sophie sitting alone in the living room, a book in her lap that she wasn't really reading. The dim light from the lamp cast a soft glow over her face, highlighting the worry lines that had begun to form on her young features. "Hey, Sophie," I said quietly as I entered the room. "Mind if I join you?" She looked up, surprised, and quickly closed the book. "Of course not, Eliza. Please, sit." I settled onto the couch beside her, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. Sophie had always been easy to talk to, but lately there had been an unspoken distance between us that I wasn't sure how to bridge. "Sophie," I began slowly, "I've noticed that things have been different around here lately, and I can't help but feel like it has something to do with Luca." Sophie sighed, her shoulders slumping. "It's not just Luca, Eliza, it's everything. Damien's been so stressed with work, and I think he's feeling a bit lost with everything that's been going on. And honestly, I'm not sure how to help him." I nodded, understanding the weight of what she was saying. Damien had always been someone who internalized his struggles, preferring to shoulder his burdens alone rather than share them with others. It was one of the things that had made our relationship so complicated over the years. "I know he's been having a hard time," I said gently. "And I'm sorry if my relationship with Luca is making things more difficult for you both. That was never my intention." Sophie shook her head, a sad smile on her lips. "It's not your fault, Eliza. Damien he doesn't like change. And I think he's worried that Luca being in your life means he's losing a part of you." "That's not true," I replied, feeling a pang of guilt. "I'll always be here for Damien, and for you and Mia. Luca doesn't change that." "I know," Sophie said, her voice soft. "But Damien doesn't see it that way. He's always been protective of you, especially after what happened with your ex-husband. I think he's afraid that Luca might hurt you, even if he doesn't realize it." I swallowed the lump in my throat, the truth of Sophie's words hitting me hard. Damien's protectiveness was rooted in love, but it was also suffocating, keeping us both trapped in a cycle of fear and mistrust. "I just want us all to be happy," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "I want Damien to be okay with Luca, and I want to feel like I can have my own life without it causing problems." Sophie reached out, placing a hand on mine. "We all want that, Eliza. But maybe we need to take a step back. Give Damien some time to adjust without feeling like he's being forced into accepting something he's not ready for." I nodded, appreciating her insight. Sophie had always been more attuned to Damien's emotions than I was, and I knew she was right. Pushing Luca on Damien too quickly would only drive him further away. "Thank you, Sophie," I said, squeezing her hand. "I'll talk to Luca about giving Damien some space. I don't want to lose my relationship with him over this." Sophie smiled, a hint of relief in her eyes. "I think that's a good idea. Damien just needs time to come to terms with everything, and I'm sure Luca will understand." Later that night, after Sophie had gone to bed, I called Luca. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar, instantly soothing the unease that had settled in my chest. "Hey, Eliza," he said, a smile evident in his tone. "I was just thinking about you." "I was thinking about you too," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Luca, I wanted to talk to you about something." "Of course. What's on your mind?" His tone shifted, sensing the seriousness in my voice. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "I've been thinking about how things have been going with Damien, and I think we need to take a step back." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear Luca exhale slowly. "A step back," he repeated, his voice measured. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I think we need to give Damien some space," I said, feeling the weight of the words as I spoke them. "He's struggling with everything right now, and I don't want to push him into accepting our relationship before he's ready. I don't want to lose him, Luca." Luca was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear him processing what I'd said. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but tinged with sadness. "I understand, Eliza," he said quietly. "I don't want to come between you and Damien. If taking a step back is what you need, then I'm willing to do that." "Thank you," I whispered, feeling a surge of gratitude for his understanding. I don't want it to mean that we're over, Luca. I just need to make sure Damien's okay first." "I know," Luca replied softly, "and I'll be here when you're ready. Take all the time you need, Eliza. I'm not going anywhere." His words brought tears to my eyes, a mixture of relief and sadness washing over me. I knew this was the right decision, but it didn't make it any easier. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my bedroom, feeling the full weight of what I'd just done. I'd asked Luca to step back, to put our relationship on hold, all in the name of preserving the fragile peace that had settled over my family. It felt like I was sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of others, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the price of this peace might be too high. The next few days were quieter. Luca and I still talked, but our conversations were more subdued, more careful. Damien seemed to sense the shift, though he didn't mention it. He came home earlier, spent more time with Sophie and Mia, and the tension in the apartment slowly began to ease. But with that easing tension came a growing emptiness inside me. The vibrant connection I'd felt with Luca, the sense of renewal and joy that had come with our relationship, now felt distant, like a dream I could barely remember. I missed him terribly, missed the way he made me feel alive, the way he reminded me that I was more than just a mother and grandmother. One evening, as I was sitting alone in the living room, Damien came in and sat down beside me. He didn't say anything at first, just sat there in silence, staring at the wall as if he were trying to find the right words. "Mom," he finally said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "I've noticed that you haven't been seeing Luca as much lately. Did something happen?" I glanced at him, surprised by the question. I hadn't expected him to bring it up, especially not now, when things had just started to feel normal again. I asked Luca to give us some space, I admitted, my voice tinged with regret. "I didn't want to push him on you and Sophie. I wanted to make sure you were okay with everything first." Damien looked down, his expression conflicted. "Mom, you didn't have to do that. I know I've been difficult about this whole thing, but I don't want you to give up your happiness because of me." I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "You're my son, Damien. Your happiness matters to me. But I also need to find my own happiness, and that's something I'm still figuring out. I know, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And I'm sorry, Mom. I don't want you to get hurt again. I won't, I promised, though I wasn't sure if I was saying it to reassure him or myself. But I also don't want to lose you. You won't lose me, Damien said, his eyes meeting mine. I just need some time, that's all. I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. Time was what we all needed, but it was also what we couldn't afford to waste. Every moment that passed felt like a missed opportunity, a chance for something better slipping through our fingers. As Damien got up to leave, he paused at the doorway, turning back to look at me. Mom, he said quietly, I want you to be happy, even if that means being with Luca. His words hung in the air long after he left the room, a bittersweet reminder of the complex web of love, loyalty, and sacrifice that bound us together. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Damien's words gave me hope, a hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to balance our needs without losing each other in the process. But deep down, I also knew that peace came at a price. And as much as I wanted to protect Damien, to ensure his happiness, I couldn't ignore the growing void in my own heart. The price of peace was high, and I was beginning to realize that I might not be able to afford it much longer.